Welcome everyone. Boker Tov. We'll start off with Abracha. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I have a compliment I want to pay all of you. So you notice that you are all women. You're all women, and that you're here to study Torah. And I'm privileged to work with all of you. And it says the reason why the Israelites were redeemed from Egypt was because of the righteousness of the women. So just the fact that you have this commitment to try and study Torah in a time when a lot of people don't want to study Torah, aren't have any interest whatsoever. And I shouldn't compliment you so much, but I think it's significant. There isn't a single man here, right? Not a single one. So just interesting. If you want to, if you want me to let me have it, you're welcome to. But I
Were
think
were
it's
there men in
interesting.
our Rashi class in St. Louis? Because I know it was predominantly women for sure.
It was again. It was again. It was so interesting.
I don't remember.
I
Harlan
think
maybe.
no, no, no. He didn't come to the Rashi class, and there were men who came from time to time, and they were all sort of, I think, intimidated. In some ways, I think Shira Beth, in her article that I was referring to, um, makes a comment that defining your role as a man isn't as simple as it is in some ways for a woman. That a woman's role in some ways, biologically, etc., is far more defined than for a man, and it's more difficult. So, I'm not here to defend it. I'm not here to really, it's not, I just thought that was an interesting observation, which I had never thought of before.
But isn't the man's role as biologically defined as not being able to have children, but being necessary for the providing of them?
Yes, but once it happens, um, there's a way in which a woman is connected to her child in a way that a man is not connected.
Right, but
Having this child grow inside of you, and then beyond that, right, the relationship that takes place
course, of
afterwards.
course, and that's her biological definition.
Yes,
And his
exactly.
excluding that would include other things such as providing and whatever, if you're, talking about this clear, sort of more old-fashioned delineation, but nonetheless, it also provides a biological need for him that's just to me as strict and simple.
I'm not so
It's
sure.
different.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there,
Yeah. And I'm
Lauren.
just saying,
I know. And it's not to say that there aren't arguments against it, but I'm wondering to myself, frankly, I've wondered to myself, why are men intimidated to come to this class? And certainly back in St. Louis, it did happen from time to time, and eventually they just couldn't handle it. Now, the Talmud class didn't go that route. The Talmud class, there were men who stayed the whole way through, and in the Midrash class, there are men who participate in it and don't get intimidated.
and
And
it
it's
could be a
yeah,
variety of motivations. It may not all be
of
intimidation.
course. I claim no expertise at this. I'm trying to
But
think of
it's interesting for sure.
it is. And the thing that I'll tell you also, that at least this is what experience has taught me, rightly or wrongly, is that women are responsible for the spiritual development of their children. The men may be responsible for their education, but remember, to educate someone, they have to want to be educated. If they don't want to be educated, you're going to have a hard time. And the truth is that when it seems to me that when mothers really understand this in general, and it has to happen early enough, obviously, there's a better likelihood. And of course, we're always talking about likelihoods. We're not talking about a simple one-to-one correspondence. But I think that statement that I started off with about the Israelite women being the reason why the Israelites were taken out of Egypt and saved and redeemed is similar, sort of all linked to that kind of idea. So, don't, a woman should never underestimate herself by any means.
I am wondering also um, how much is, generational, and I don't mean each successive, but
Yes,
I think it's much harder for a man to find out what it is to be a man
I think it
in
is.
this
Right,
particular in this culture,
right.
and um, uh, I just think it's always hard to figure out what it is,
Hmm.
and that when it was no women and when it was always men, and you were putting yourself against other men, um, it was clearer.
Yes.
Um, the other thing, and this may not be related, but I remember in college reading about how teachers would call on men. I mean, they would always call on males and not
Hmm.
females, and it was notable. Then, when I'm teaching fourth grade in Hebrew school, I found, so I'm very conscious of it. I found myself doing it.
Hmm.
And I realized it was because the girls were paying attention. But if I didn't call on the boys, they wouldn't.
Yes, that's very interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that because women's roles have been changing since the feminist movement,
Yes.
that's one reason why there's some more nebulousness in a man's understanding of their role. But I also think for the same reason there's more confusion among women about what kind of role they could or should have, and because the changes affect both genders, I think, equally.
No question about it.
But
When you
so
say
differently, and it's
yes,
lopsided.
Differently,
I agree.
And so for
right,
women,
differently, but
No,
you're used to, as a woman, you're used to maybe not knowing. And once you are empowered to ask, particularly in a respectful religious setting, um, like this, um, you know, Lisa, as a beginner, is, willing to say, I'm a beginner. But, most 50-year-old men aren't willing to say, I'm a
mm,
rank beginner.
mm, mm.
So,
but if you put that in historical context, women have known their place for a very, very long time. And yes, so now there's a little bit of choice, and it's a little bit confusing. And men have not been any confused much, shorter time than women. So, they're all, it's a modern time. Things are changing in terms of gender restrictions in a lot of ways, and everybody will have to find their way. And yes, there's different struggles, but
Yes.
I don't think but I think that they're parallel struggles. I don't think that men struggle so much and women are just fine because they've gotten used to the changes. I don't see it that way.
I don't think Shira Beth is trying to argue that at all. In
Your best
fact,
friend
she
did
she
that.
she she is
Oh,
from her article. What she says quite explicitly that in some ways there is now a critique of traditional roles that women used to take pride in. You have to read her article to be fair, but no, I agree. I'm not suggesting for one second that it's easier on women now or something like that, or that yes, that the gender roles are now challenging for both. And I'm not saying we should go backwards either. I'm just saying it would be helpful to have a broader understanding of also, the pernicious underbellies of all these kinds of changes, as well as what is positive about them. You
I
know,
have something to say.
please.
Also, in these times, in the Torah,
Mm,
um, there they didn't have the kind of even thought of choice about who they were going to be and what kind of laws they would come under.
mhm.
We have a choice now.
Yes.
So there is something more biological about ancient times because we were closer to being um, if you we're all animals, so we were closer to being animals than we are now with all of the refinement of our times and the choices of our times.
I don't know
Mm,
about that. But I also don't know about the pernicious underbelly, because as far as judging the effects of change as negative, as opposed to effects that you don't know. It's too, when change is happening, you can't make a judgment on like you can once it's historical and once time has allowed us to see exactly what the effects of the change are and how it's affected society. Every action has positive and negative to it, every single one of them, every decision, every action. And you can't judge it in the moment. You can make assumptions, but if you live long enough to look back on change and how things have changed, and you know all kinds of issues related to that change, you might have a different perspective. I mean, God certainly has a perspective that you don't know. And whether or not God shares your current perspective about the pernicious underbelly is something you can't know. Whether history will share that perspective, you can't know. But it's your opinion now that that's true. It may or may not be.
So I'm
Thank
not sure
you.
we're saying anything that different because, when I'm saying pernicious underbelly, I'm merely using language to describe the negative sides of it, and just to
That's
be aware of it.
general.
Let me finish. My concern is that there's no pause at all. And it's not that I would disagree with you that perspective is terribly important, and sometimes you can only judge or be in a better position to judge the ultimate effects of something, from the long view. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second that I share in any way significantly how the divine sees these sorts of things. My best bet is the approximation and trying to tie in to try to get, again, to look at the sources, to try to understand the sources as best as I can on their own terms. All right. And then compare that and contrast it to what I see going on. The phenomenon that I'm seeing right now is the fact that no men are joining us. That's a phenomenon. That's a fact. Okay. How we choose to understand that fact is a puzzle. Is a puzzle. And we're having a conversation about this. And I'm having a conversation with each and every one of you because on the one hand, I think legitimately you can say I have a perspective that tends to be male, along male lines, and a woman might see things differently. But of course, every man then, as individuals now, each one of you has a different perspective within that possible general observation. And of course, I say this tentatively, because I may be wrong, okay? But I know that I've been accused of it, and I feel there are things that I can't say simply because I'm a man, and that I will be judged as a man saying those things, as opposed to whether there's legitimacy or any illegitimacy to what I'm saying, to the statement itself. It's very hard to dissociate the statement itself and the person who's making the statement.
Yes, but men and women have to be free to talk about their opinions and discuss them and disagree and everything with that, so whether you feel the disagreement is based on just the fact that you're a man, I mean,
Mhm.
that's possible that that's in the mix for some people, in terms of their disagreements or agreements with you. But the conversation shouldn't be limited by your fear that it may be that you're being judged as a man. Even if you're talking about, some women will say, you can't talk about this. It's not your body. It's not your, choice, not this
Mhm.
and that. Well, that's, no, men should be able to state any opinion they want to. And women should be able to counter it if they want to, for whatever reasons, whatever mix of motivations they have, including gender. It's,
It's
Okay,
very
well,
good.
I have
Go
I
ahead,
have one. Okay.
please,
I thought we
please.
were also contrasting then and now. And so with what I was saying was there was more of a community herd, you got to stay together, and there was a survival thing going on back then also as a species. Now, um, I have to personalize it too. Of course, I grew up. I was born in the 50s, and I decided not to have children, and I decided to be a part of a male-dominated business in many different aspects, all the way along my 60 plus years of being a professional, whatever I chose, a male-dominated, and that is a different choice in my fitting in, if you would say, to a society now, which never would have even survived back then. That's it. Thank
What
you.
wouldn't have, what would not have survived back
Me,
then?
me
Oh,
being
you're,
able, me being able to bear children and choosing
Right.
not to, and then wanting to like hang with the men and be equal to the men, you know, and even being one of the leaders of the male dominated, you know, whatever it is that they were doing. I would have been dead.
so my niece view, Charlie, for college, they're taking a Hasidic, a class in that's some kind of about Hasidism, and this is at Sarah Lawrence, and they wrote an amazing paper about, and Rabbi, you might know about this person, but this is a woman from the Ludmir. She was called something like the Saint of Ludmir, who was considered to be like a woman rabbi in the early days of Hasidism. And
I'm not familiar. Yeah, go ahead.
up in Palestine. It's an amazing, amazing paper, and I can send it to you.
That would be good.
There are a lot of legends written about her and some sketchier documentary information that's written about her, but because not a lot of known, some of it's filled in with legends. But you know, so there were always choices, and there were always people bucking the system always. But of course, it's much easier now. But as far as like what I was saying about the animals and the people, and I was just talking about this yesterday and thinking about this yesterday for various reasons. But the more I learn about the capabilities of the intelligence of non-human animals, and the more I learn about the natural aggression and other urges of human animals, I see so little difference. I know that I'm not saying that I'm not saying, and I can't say that there is, you know, a difference or a separation that I can and say this is makes what makes us human and what makes them not. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm saying I can't see it at this point, and I keep delving into this, and it's getting tougher for me to do it. But the fact that we have religion and the fact that we have God right now is the only difference that I see. Not our ability to think, our ability to create, our
Right.
ability to, you know, make tools and be resourceful or learn vocabulary, none of that,
I agree.
you know, and not our aggression, you
I
know.
agree. I agree 100%. I agree. I think that religion actually is something that can make us human. Listen, this has been a great discussion. It's now about 10 to 8. I do want to do a little bit of, not to say that this hasn't been a discussion about Torah in its own way, but let me legitimize my role here, at least in the sense of doing a little bit of Torah and Rashi. So, but thank you. I'm sorry to cut this off, actually. I think it's a great discussion, and I appreciate it very much. Okay, thank you. Is that okay with everyone, I hope? All right. I guess I just have to do it, right? Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm trying to see where we started. I know we had this long thing, this long Rashi with a grammatical thing, and we have more grammar that Rashi does, and I think the reason why, because it's so unlike the typical Rashi comments, is that again, assuming that Rashi was trying to somehow protect the Jews against a lot of conversion going on, because missionaries were capable of quoting Bible in very capable ways, as they do to this day at times. Certain individuals, I've certainly experienced it years ago in South Africa. He wanted people to understand, even people who weren't educated or didn't have a yeshiva, that is a higher education Jewishly, to be able to defend themselves and not be converted out of Judaism. So I think the reason he gets into the Hebrew itself is because, you know, they're claiming to use the Hebrew text, and he's saying, well, this is the grammatical basis of understanding these texts. So let me go into this now. We may not actually get to this next grammatical issue here. All right. Vayikra Yes. Vayikra melech Mitzrayim lamilyaldot. I think we did this verse actually. The king of Egypt called the midwives. Vayomer lehem madua asiten hadavar hazeh. Why did you do this thing? Vatechayen na et hayeladim. And you allowed the babies to survive, the boy babies, that is, right? Vatomarna hamayaladot el paro. I'm sorry, let's see. Did we do 17? Did we do the Rashi on 17?
Yeah, I think that we're on the second parsha, which you kind of just like, as I said, read that one non-Rashi
Yes.
verse. So I think that the
Right.
second parsha is kind of what we're doing now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me find the. Oops. Went too far. Okay. Here we are. All right. So we're on to 18 now, and this is it. Here we go. There's no 18. All right. Go to 19. Vatomarna hamiyaldot. And the midwives said, El Paro, to Pharaoh, Ki lo chanashim hamitzriot ha'ivriot. The the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. Ki chayot hena, for they are, and Lauren, you're going to like this, they are animals. Chayot, right? Or they are lively. They are lively. Or there's going to be a very interesting Rashi on this. But so here it goes. Beterem tavor, before comes alehem, to them, hamialdot, the midwives, vayaladu, they already give birth. They have given birth by the time we arrive. There's nothing, you asked us to do this when they're on the birth stool, can't do it. They've already given birth. Now, whether this is true or it isn't, I think the assumption is that this is the truth. Although it did say above, they allowed them to live, but that still could be true. This excuse could still be true. Ki chayot hena. There we go. Bekiot kemiyaldot. They are experts like midwives. And he says, because Tirgum Mialdot, the Aramaic translation of a Mialedet, of midwife, is Chayta, right? So the word Chaya in Hebrew, in its relationship to Aramaic, can mean they are midwives. So in other words, the Shifra and Pua were saying, or Yocheved and Miriam were saying to Pharaoh, they understand the skill. They understand the skill of midwifery. Okay. So another interpret. They really play around with this word. The Rabbatenu Darshu, and our rabbis also interpreted, and this is probably all right. Sham, which is probably Sota, which is where a lot of the stuff is coming from. Veshmot Rabbah, I'm going to guess, right? Exodus Rabbah. Hare Hain Mishulot Lachayot. They are compared to animals. And of course, hasadeh, to wild animals, animals of the field, she'enan srichot mialdot. They don't require midwives, these wild animals. Vehechan mishulot lachayot, and Rashi says, and where exactly are they compared to animals, to wild animals? Well, Jacob's blessing, gur aryeh, right? A lion's whelp. Ze'ev, remember Benjamin, Ze'ev Toref, Ze'ev Yitrof. Jacob says to Benjamin, you are like the wolf who is, uh, it's like killing another animal, tearing it to pieces. A Bechor B'Shorah, with Joseph, he says he is the firstborn of his ox, something like that, right?
Is taref the same verb as
Yeah,
treif?
it is, and it means torn as opposed to shechted. Good question. Yes. So when something's a treifa, it means it was torn apart. Generally, the context is by another animal, but because the idea of eating unshechted meat, they recognized that it was so easy for people to run and to not care about it. They describe it in a way that people would be disgusted at it. So non-shechted meat is like meat ripped apart by another animal, because it wasn't because shechting, as you know, removes the blood. It's a very clean cut, etc. So, yep, treif and treif, it's exactly the same word, and just transported into Yiddish.
I'm sorry to add in one more thing, but it had intrigued me when you changed the name or
Ju-
showed
Ju-
that Sharon Pua were Miriam and Yoched.
okay,
But then what is a Jewish midwife talking to Pharaoh and saying, those women don't need wives? Wouldn't Pharaoh's
okay, Judith, your internet or my internet is not hearing you well. I don't even know if you can even hear me.
Yeah, she's breaking up.
Yeah, I can't really make out the question. Judith, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear your question.
Can you hear it now?
It's okay. It's manageable. It's not great.
If Shifra and Pua
Yes.
were Miriam and Yocheved,
Yes.
and they spoke to Pharaoh, how could they say those women? Wouldn't Pharaoh know they were Jewish midwives?
He didn't, of course, he did know they were Jewish midwives, because he knew that the Israelite women wouldn't be having Egyptian midwives, if I'm understanding your question correctly. And so they were simply responding to Pharaoh. And perhaps I'm misunderstanding your question, Judith. You're muted, Judith.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You got it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let me keep going a little bit, because I can't believe how quickly the time goes. Ayala shlucha, right? A doe that has been set free. This is how I'm understanding it. Umi shelo nichtav bo, but there were a whole bunch of those sons of Jacob who were not compared to an animal. And they say, Umi shelo nichtav bo, and regarding those who are not compared to animals, hare hakatuv kolalan. The scripture text actually includes all of them, because it says, Vayevarech otam. It says, he blessed them all. So they're all connected in the blessing. The Od Ketiv, and another verse states, this is again this is chapter 19. Let's see. So it's not in Genesis, okay? But ma imcha leviyah, as your mother was a lioness. I'm sorry, I was trying to spell that there and it didn't come out right. So, okay. Yeah. Or lavi, or if it's imcha lavi, or because, or else it's your nation is a lion. Perhaps it's better. Although am would be with an
There
ayin.
it says mother.
Yeah, it has to be, because amcha would be with an ayin and not with an aleph. Right. So regardless, that we are. So I thought that was sort of interesting, Lauren, given the comment you were making at the end of our discussion this morning. We'll try and get one. Well, it is 8:00, but I'm going to get in one more verse.
It's a
But
long Rashi though.
yeah, I know that's the grammatical one, I think. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. He discusses vayetev, right? The form of this word. Vayetev Elohim lameyaldot, and God did good to the midwives. That is, of course, Shifra and Pua, because they were willing to, forgive me, this is a common phrase these days, they were willing to speak to power. Okay, Vayariv ha'am, and the people multiplied, Vayatzmu ma'od, and they became mighty. All right, so let me keep going just a little bit more. Vayhi kiyaru hamiyaladot et Elohim. It's so interesting, and it was that because the midwives feared God. In other words, they feared God as opposed to
Pharaoh.
Exactly. Vayas lahem batim. He made for them, that is, God made for them houses. And by houses, Rashi explains, he means dynasties. Because Aharon, of course, became the Kohen Gadol, and from his family were the priests. And Moses, in a sense, was king. He was, in a sense, a king. We'd have to look at the Rashi itself to see where that goes, because of course kings ultimately came from Judah, from the tribe of Judah. So, but that, if you think about how Moses functioned, at least he himself, he did. So, but there were other dynasties, and I think Rashi does explain that after he goes into the grammatical point about this. He talks about the fact that this is a two-letter root, and when it's in the causal, there's some Hebrew grammar here. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Talking about.
Vayetev.
Okay, so you're back at the end.
Just discussing that briefly, yes. Let me stop here because we are out of time, and let me wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I'm going to stop the recording. Where am I? Okay, let's see what I can do to do that. Okay, here we go.
Still on.
Okay, I'm looking. Huh, that's funny. Okay, let me do this. Okay, stop. I'm going to stop the share, and then I'm going to stop the recording. And thank those who joined us.